Well, good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well in all this time of crisis. I wanted to talk to you about a subject. It's in the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible. And then I had this realization, not a revelation, I would say revelation, but I don't want people to think that God's talking to me and I'm some sort of a prophet. I'm not. Just a regular guy using his brain. Anyways, why does God stop talking directly to Abraham after he tells him to sacrifice his only son Isaac? We'll get to that in just a second, at least a perspective of that. And it's not a radical perspective. It's not something that people are arguing about. But anyway, let's go back to chapter 6 for a minute. You remember when God tells Noah to build the ark and take his family and 2 of every animal, or 7 pairs of every clean animal. So a lot of people, atheists, like to say, well, that's a contradiction. First he says 2 animals, then he says 7 animals. It's not a contradiction at all. They would need the clean animals for sacrifices. All right? So if you only brought 1 pair of animals and then you sacrificed them after, we wouldn't have lambs and goats and rams and oxes, right? So there were a lot of animals on that ark. But there were probably only 2 pigs. All right? Because they don't sacrifice pigs. There was probably only 2 chickens. They never sacrificed chickens in the Bible. Anyway, let's move on from that. God tells Noah, hey, I'm sick of all the depravity. I build an ark. I get on with your family and the animals. And what does Noah do? Noah's like, yeah, all right, that's cool. And then they get off the ark, and God makes this covenant of the rainbow. Do you remember that? And he says, never again will I do anything like this, where I flood the earth and kill all the people and all the living creatures. And he makes good on his promise. And there's a rainbow, which is a sign. It's the covenant. A covenant's a promise. And the rainbow is something everyone can see. All right? But anyway, this is very interesting because every now and then you'll see these rules like stuck in the middle of dialogue that seem kind of out of context from what God's talking about at that particular time. For example, in chapter 9, when they get off the ark, right before he makes the covenant of the rainbow, he makes this rule that says you must not eat meat with the lifeblood in it. Now, it has been explained to me that this rule was made because back then we didn't have refrigeration, we didn't have freezers, and you wanted to eat a hamburger, you'd have to kill the whole cow and make the hamburger, and then the next day or so that meat would go bad. So what they were doing is they were just chopping off parts of the animal and then tying it off so that the animal would live longer, so they would have more meat. Not a very pleasant experience for the animal, right? So that's why God made this law. Don't kill animals or don't eat animals unless they're dead, unless you kill them properly. All right? And then it occurred to me that there's another rule just like this, again, stuck in the middle of context that seems out of place, in Deuteronomy chapter, was it 25? I think it's either, 25, verse 4. He's talking about marriage laws and stuff like that. And right in the middle of that, all that dialogue at the end of chapter, or in the beginning of chapter 25, he says the command to not muzzle an ox while it's treading out the grain. Again, this is a mercy, a kindness to animals, because the animals, they don't have a concept of time. When they're out there trading the grain, plowing the fields, all they see is food. And if they're hungry, they're not going to be able to say, well, we're going to eat in a half hour, I can wait, like a person can. So you have to be merciful to them. Take the muzzle off. Let them eat as they're going along. But let's get back to Noah and Abraham. What's the difference between Noah and Abraham? Well, Noah, when God told him to build the ark, he just said, be all right, let's do it. Get it done. So now we're looking at Genesis chapter 19, and this is where God says he's going to go down and destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham bargains with them. He's saying, well, what if there's 50 righteous people? Then will you still destroy it? God says no. Well, what if there's 40 or 30 or 20? And finally gets them down to 10 before he's like, look, if there's okay, if there's 10 righteous people, I will not destroy it. And then he goes away. Well, what's interesting about this is his character, the character of Abraham at this point, which is different from Noah. Noah was more like, when God says he's going to destroy everybody, he's just like, yeah, okay, let's go ahead and do it. Abraham's kind of like, whoa, hold on a minute. Let's look at this thing differently. What if there's righteous people there? So he's kind of sticking up for these people that he's never met, strangers, complete strangers that he's never known, that he never will know. And I think that's interesting because when you get to the point where God finally calls him down to sacrifice his son Isaac, then what happens? Abraham's like, yeah, all right, just like Noah did. And we see something very interesting. That's when God stops speaking directly to Abraham. He still makes good on all his promises, that from him will come, he will bless them, the nations and all that. But here's the aspect which isn't really right there in front of your face. It's kind of sublime. You got to kind of notice it. An angel of the Lord comes to Abraham and tells him to stop killing, or not to kill his son Isaac. And then an angel of the Lord tells him that God will make good on his promise. Now, why doesn't God come down himself and do that? Is there a message there? Is there a deeper meaning to that? Perhaps, maybe this means that Abraham probably should have went to bat for his own child just the way he did for complete strangers. And we see this all the time, where people are nice to people in public and everything, and they're out with their husbands or their families, and then as soon as they get in the car or the house and the doors are closed, they're like, "Ah, ah, 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 ah," and they're yelling at their husband and their kids or the cats or the dogs. Maybe God wants us to extend the same courtesy, especially in these times where we're all cooped up with each other like Noah on the ark. Maybe he wants us to extend the same kindness and courtesy to our own families as we do to strangers. Just something to think about. Have a nice day.